Hi, welcome to the Whitey White Guy Show. I'm Whitey, and I'm going to review the film Apollo 13, which came out in 1995. It stars Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton, Ed Harris, and Gary Sinise, among a whole slew of other actors, very talented actors. It's directed by Ron Howard, and it follows the real life Apollo 13 mission. And if you're not familiar, this was it happened in I thought it was 1969, but maybe it was 1970. Um, but well, let's begin with Tom Hanks plays the flight commander named Jim Lovell, and he's got Gary Sinise and Bill Paxton with him on his three-man crew that's going to do this flight and do a walk on the moon. Um, Partway into right up to they're ready to do the launch, the flight surgeon is concerned that Gary Sinise's character, Ken Mattingly, has the measles he's been in contact with somebody who has the measles. He hasn't had the measles. He's going to come down with the measles. So there's a last minute switch between Ken Mattingly and Jack Swigert, played by Kevin Bacon. So now it's Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, and Bill Paxton who are going to the moon. And I believe it was the first day, they're in space, and a damaged coil in their oxygen tank sparked, caused an explosion, badly damaging the spacecraft. And the whole film from there is how to get them back. Um, Ed Harris plays the flight commander named Gene Kranz. And then from there, there's just a bunch of different actors. But it's basically you have this catastrophe in space as they're heading to the moon, so they have to go around, use the moon's gravity to slingshot them back around, fire up the LEM, and I'll get to this stuff later, and get them back before basically they run out of oxygen, water, whatever resources need to get back, food, obviously, and then they have to hit a very narrow flight corridor with all their systems damaged, and so they had to make every kind of use the spacecraft in different ways than it was designed to do to pull off this very difficult maneuver with just 100 variables against them. Again, this came out in 1995, and Ron Howard directed, and I just rewatched it again. It looks phenomenal. This is 2022. This came out in 95. And like Jurassic Park, if you watch Jurassic Park, that came out in 1993, and the dinosaurs look phenomenal even now. It's the same kind of thing. The CG really holds up. There was a lot of practicals combined with computer graphic effects. Obviously, you're not going to be actually go into space and film something, the old spacecraft they don't even have anymore. So a lot of CG had to be used at a time when computer graphics were in their infancy, and they just crushed it. Flat out cry. I couldn't tell you how. One thing they did do is let me see if I can find this. This is from Wikipedia. Ron Howard went to great lengths to create technically accurate movie, employing NASA's assistance and astronaut and flight controller training for his cast and obtaining permission to film scenes aboard a reduced gravity aircraft for realistic depiction of the weightlessness experienced by the astronauts in space. So they called it the Vomit Comet, and it's basically a plane that will fly for a while and then just I don't know if it noses down, but it has to, and it basically, as it goes out real fast for about a minute, you're weightless, and so you're floating around in space. So they trained on this for a bit, and so all the scenes, there's stuff floating around them, and they are floating around, very realistic looking. But I mean, it's just a fantastic film. So the film looks great. It's incredibly well directed by Ron Howard. He just crushed it. It's an excellent story that's really engaging. You really get to know these characters to the extent that you need to. And when they gotta somehow get back to Earth, and you got that final minute where you're worried whether or not the the heat shield is going to hold up in the atmosphere. Are they going to burn up? I mean, you're sweating that the first time you see it. And the acting is outstanding. Tom Hanks is outstanding as always, or as I won't say always because I saw that one movie. He's been in a couple awful movies, but here he's crushing it. Kevin Bacon is, to me, is a little bit hit and miss. He's A plus in it across the board. Bill Paxton is fantastic in this movie. Ed Harris, really everybody. Gary Sinise, and it's just got a fantastic ensemble cast. That was a lot of fun. And Ron Howard does something I really appreciate, where he doesn't just focus on the handful of big names and primary characters. He really spreads the joy around to all these lesser known uh, people who worked at NASA, and gives you a good overview of all the different people that were involved to get these guys home alive. You go back and forth a bit between what's happening at NASA and what's happening in the home of Jim Lovell and his wife, who's played by Kathleen Quinlan, and his three kids. It was four kids, and it's just, there's some really emotional moments where they're watching this whole catastrophe live on TV, and is dad ever coming home? And so you really get a sense of what they had to go through. Um, but just fantastic acting across the board, fantastic filmmaking. But the other thing that's interesting too is that you learn just how this works. So they developed a rocket, the Saturn V rocket, which fires them off into the atmosphere. Then they're going to hit some buttons on the control panel. That's going to detach the rocket from the rest of the vessel, and it actually comes apart into different components. So you have the LEM, which is designed, it's this spider-looking guy that lands on the moon. You have the capsule that is made for reentry, and they're together. And then behind that, you have, what is it? It is the service module that you know uh, has a flame coming out and propels it forward. And they're in three separate components after dumping a lot of other components. It's really fascinating to watch, but because the service module has been damaged by this explosion, they can't use that, or it could explode and kill everybody. So they have to use the LEM, which is only designed to land on the moon, to fire up for course correction, which it wasn't, again, designed for. But you watch the process by which they had to problem solve and innovate to get out of there. And at one point, the filters for the oxygen in the different aircraft were designed. One's got square. It's the filter is square, goes into a square hole, and the other one's round. And so when the round ones get saturated, they have to use the square ones. So they hand it over to another team who has to take all the stuff that they would have on board and build a way to get a square peg in a round hole, make a filter to suck the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, so that doesn't kill the astronauts, which it would do. And that's some intense stuff. So you got three guys communicating with mission control on the radio, taking stuff from around the ship and building this filter. But it's done, and it could be really boring if you just watch that. But the way it's directed, you're on the edge of your seat. Are these guys going to live? But I can't praise this film enough. It holds up incredibly well. The effects hold up amazingly well. Yeah, you can tell they're effects at times, but still they look great, all things considered. The acting is first rate. I mean, if you haven't seen Apollo 13, for the love of science, go watch Apollo 13. You can be a 7-year-old kid watch this movie and appreciate it, or a 70-year-old man watch this film and appreciate it. And I so miss these. We really, you walk away from this movie just full of pep and vinegar going, okay, USA, we can do anything. We can problem solve and use engineering to fix any problem. It's just amazing feat of brain power. And in a wash of communism and white hate and America hate and all this stuff that you see in all these films, and hate men, and it's just like, yeah, so sick of it. This was so uplifting and so well made. boy, could we use these. We could use these movies in the worst way. Um, but the reality is the people getting work as writers today are crap at writing. And the films coming out today look fantastic. CG is in its full glory. They're phenomenal looking movies. The acting today is typically pretty good, but the stories are crap. And we keep regurgitating the comic book movies and the superhero movies. So burned out on all this. So I really would love to see this type of film come back. This type of uplifting, let's work together, we can, pull together and make it happen kind of film. And you just don't see them that much anymore. Too much agenda. This was maybe it's my bias as a white dude, as an American, but I don't see agenda behind this. There's no villains. There's nobody you're supposed to hate. It's the environment is the obstacle. Overcoming space, overcoming gravity and lack thereof, and physics. And they have to fire up the LEM to get enough speed at the right angle so that when they toilet paper, I don't really have a ball to use right here. So when here's the Earth, here's them coming in. If they're too hit at the wrong angle, they'll skip right off the Earth's atmosphere. If they're too steep, they'll burn up in the atmosphere, and so they have to hit the exact right angle. And so here's the moon, here's the Earth, and they have to come around and nail it. And by mathematics, pen and paper, and figuring out the algebra, they managed to pull this off. It's really something to behold. So, Apollo 13, if you have not seen for some reason, go watch this movie. Stop the other crap you got going in your life, because that's what it is, just crap, and go watch Apollo 13. So, this is Whitey White Guy Show. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, all that kind of deal. And I'll see you on the next review. Cheers.